This podcast is sponsored by Wahoo, the first company to ever get me excited about a treadmill. Look, we all know that there's nothing quite like running outside, but the Wahoo Kicker Run is the next best thing. It's a high performance treadmill that responds to your running pace in real time. And that's not like other treadmills. You know, if you want other treadmills to do anything, you have to press buttons. But in the Kicker Run's run free mode, a sensor actually tailors the treadmill speed to your current running pace. So you can quickly accelerate or slow down without constantly pushing buttons. It's pretty much like you were running outside. Now, the first time I tried the Kicker Run, I couldn't believe how smooth it felt under my feet as I cruised at its fastest speed, 4 minutes per mile.
Dude, you lasted like 30 seconds at 4 minutes a mile.
It was like 45. Now, the Wahoo Kicker Run also integrates with a whole range of apps, including the interactive fitness platform Zwift Run, which takes you on a virtual course with real gradients, pace feedback, and other runners from across the world. And here's the best part. It allows you to properly keep up with your training on cold, wet, and stormy days, without awkward pace changes or desperate stares at the clock. And so when the spring finally comes, you're ready for race day.
Hold on. So that means that I can get to the Boston Marathon actually healthy and fit for the first time ever?
Exactly. Thanks to Wahoo for sponsoring this podcast.
This is the Marathon Handbook Podcast. My name is Michael Doyle, and I am joined by this show's equivalent of running Yoda, Katelyn Tossi, and the show's R2D2, Alex Sear.
Greetings.
Wow. A Star Trek reference when I make a Star Wars reference. You're trying to piss some people off.
Listen, you put me on the spot. I didn't know what to do. What's your R2D2? If I tell you to imitate R2D2 on the spot, what do you do?
Dude, you've never seen Star Wars before?
Yeah, but I panicked. I had 2 seconds. I thought aliens.
He's a robot. Anyway, today is the reason why.
This isn't my expertise, Michael.
I also have not seen Star Wars. Okay, sorry.
What? Oh my God.
Okay.
How are we starting?
Sorry, we're
episode already.
Sorry, guys.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Deep breaths, everybody. Let's pull this together here. Today, we are celebrating Eliud Kipchoge on his 40th birthday. So this podcast comes out on Thursday, November 6th, and yesterday in the future, because we're recording this in advance. Yesterday, Mr. Kipchoge, the greatest distance runner, the greatest marathon runner of all time, the man who is indeed one of the true GOATs in sports, turned 40 years young. Or did he? We'll get into that later. But he officially has turned 40 years old. And we decided we'd take advantage of this great celebration to look back on the last, let's say, 7 or 8 years of his professional marathoning career so that we can glean from his greatness what we can use as runners, as distance runners and marathon runners in particular, ourselves, what we've learned from Kipchoge, what he's given us. And there's a lot. I feel like, we were talking about this before we hit the record button here, and he's single-handedly helped drag distance running and marathon running in particular into a whole new era. So we're going to unpack all of the different components of that and how you as an audience can use some of the learnings, some of the great teachings of the philosopher king, the warrior monk of distance running, Eliud Kipchoge. But before we get into that, this is an Eliud Kipchoge news and notes update. Did you guys see that there's been some rumblings about Mr. Kipchoge lately? Obviously, he famously DNF'd the Olympic marathon in Paris, coming in as the 2-time reigning champion in the Olympics in the marathon. And it kind of felt like a big changing of the guard. We talked about it in our podcast talking about the Olympics. But there's been some news. There's been some rumors. Rumor one this week was Eliud Kipchoge is retiring. That was rumor one. Sketchy websites, though.
Yeah, I didn't hear it. I didn't hear that one. I heard rumor 2, I think. Or I heard a completely different rumor.
I think rumor 1 spun off from rumor 2, which was?
Rumor 2 is that he is apparently going to run a 10K
That's what I heard.
Thailand.
Mm-hmm.
He has become an ambassador to Asia for world athletics, for the world marathon majors, for running at large, for Nike, for world peace. He's going to Asia. He's running a bit. He's talking to people. He's shaking hands and kissing babies. Obviously, China in particular is a big growth area for the sport globally. It feels like a big, huge, untapped market if you're talking in marketing terms. But he's going to Thailand to run a 10K in the new year, which is interesting. And then he's also said that he's going to provide an update about his future in January, because there's been a lot of gossip, obviously some rumors, and I guess he wants to put those to rest and kind of like unpack for us, like, this is my future, because it seems like a pretty uncertain future for the guy. We'll get into what we our recommendations, because Eliud really needs our help here, but we can get into that at the end. But let's get right into what this guy has done for distance running and what we can learn from it, what we have learned from it in some degrees, how we've benefited from it. And I think a conversation about Eliud Kipchoge and about what the marathon in particular has been in the last 7 years starts with shoes.
Okay. This is Alex's forte.
Alex, go.
The shoes. The shoes.
The shoes.
It's easy to think about Kipchoge as the man of the era, of the super shoe era, right? Right around the time that Nike came out with their generation defining super shoe, the Vaporfly Next Percent. It was a shoe with special foam, supercritical foam, and a carbon plate. So shoes that now are everywhere. Most people race with shoes like that. Nike was the first one there. They released these shoes kind of surreptitiously in 2016 at the Olympics. And after that, shortly after that, they had this whole Breaking 2 event where they took 3 of the top runners in the world and put them on a special course with a bunch of benefits, try to make them faster. They trained them for this event to see if a man could break 2 hours. The men were Lelisa Desisa of Ethiopia, Zersine Tedesse of Eritrea, and a certain Eliud Kipchoge, who ended up being the only athlete who came close to that 2-hour barrier, right? He ran 2 hours 25. And by then, Kipchoge was already pretty solidified as a generational athlete. He had won a string of major marathons. But I think that solidified his status as the man of the new super shoe era. And from there, the rest is history, right? If you're a fan of running, you've seen him eventually break the 2-hour barrier, 1:59, in that Ineos, another Breaking 2 challenge, which again had a bunch of technology surrounding it that Kipchoge carried through to the finish line. He kept winning marathon majors. He won 2 Olympic golds. And, this is like a 10-year period. Oh, he set the world record as well. I mean, we could go on and on. I think the biggest storyline in running in the last 10 years is that technologically it's at such a different place. And if we could put one man or woman in the middle of it all, who's been around the longest in this technological era and who's championed it the best, it's Eliud Kipchoge.
I look back at the innocent days of 2017, before May 2017. I look back and there was the world record at the time. We've mentioned this guy in the podcast more than he probably deserves. I mean, poor Dennis Kimetto. He was a kind of a bit of a flash in the pan in retrospect, but he ran just under 203, 202.57 in 2014 in Berlin. And I wore the same shoe that Kimetto wore in that race because he was an Adidas guy. And I wore that shoe for quite a while. That was like my go-to shoe. It was the pre-super shoe era Adidas Adios. And it's like, I still got a bunch of pairs in the basement, and in the shoe drawer of doom, it's like 100 pairs of running shoes I don't know what to do with, right? I'm sure we've all got those. And man, they're like slippers. It's crazy that we used to run in these shoes. It's absolutely wild. And then Kipchoge shows up and takes like 2.5, almost more than 2.5 minutes off the world record at breaking 2 in this totally new shoe. It seemed wild at the time. It seemed like science fiction. The shoe was really weird for back in the day. Everyone had been going towards smaller, lighter, thinner, just like, how can we reduce the shoe down to almost nothing? And then Nike comes out with this sort of super secret shoe that something was up in the Olympics in 2016, because the shoes looked a little different. There was a little more foam underfoot. It was like, what's going on here? But nobody knew what was really going on. There's a plate in the shoe, that the foam was completely different. It was made of PIBA, which is a totally different compound than the shoe material that's being used in other shoes at the time. And then at breaking 2, it was like this wild moment where it was like, we got this new technology, we're putting somebody on the moon. And which was actually, the marketing was like, we're putting someone on the moon. This is like a moonshot. We're going to go for it. So, I mean, the shoes, this guy was the face of the super shoe movement. He is the guy who has single-handedly brought that into the fore, and all of the changes with that. I hung around the Chicago Marathon and watched people running by 3 hours, 45 minutes to about 4 hours, 15 minutes going by in the last couple of kilometers of the race. A lot of people wearing super shoes in that time frame. And I think initially when Nike came out with the super shoe in 2017, the 4% was the first version of it. I don't think Nike thought that this was going to be a product that was going to be marketed to that degree to the masses. I thought they were just trying to come up with we compare super shoes to performance cars all the time. I think they thought they were making like a very high performance track car, not a
Honda Civic.
Well, definitely not a Honda Civic, but
a car that many people have.
Yeah, a car So I ski, downhill skiing, and there's a term in skiing called your quiver. Your quiver, like, what's your quiver? And it's in reference to like a bag of arrows, right? Mm-hmm. So how many arrows do you have in your bag? How many skis do you have in your set? Because there's like different skis for different ski days. And a lot of people just try to go with one ski because skis are expensive. But many experienced skiers have multiple pairs of skis for different ski days, different environments, that sort of thing. It kind of feels like Kipchoge ushered in this era of like, you got to have multiple pairs of shoes. You got to own super shoes that you only wear on race day. That was not a thing for the masses before this. I think some people would have you'd have racing flats if you were really into running. But if you were just recreational runner, running maybe a marathon or 2 a year, trying to run a personal best, but you were just thinking more about comfort than you were about bleeding edge technology. Now people are buying super shoes. So I think that
even with Alex, Alex has taught us in so many of our podcast episodes about all the different types of shoes and what we need for each kind of workout that we're doing. And I think absolutely, when I started out as a runner, I had, one pair of shoes for the road and one pair of shoes for the trail, because obviously I needed them for the terrain. But now it's, one pair of shoes for fast workouts, tempo stuff, one pair of shoes for my everyday runs, and then my racing shoes, and then maybe long run shoes. So I think that even as a recreational runner, we are into that shoe rotation and thinking that, each pair of shoes for each type of workout is going to give us some kind of an important advantage for us. And I don't think just elite runners need it. Even for us, everyone's working to their own goals. And if they're going to improve performance by any percentage, I know I want that. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Then you get into this like great man theory question, right? Because you could say that we would have gotten to this point with shoes and technology with or without Kipchoge, potentially. But I want to bring it back to Kipchoge here because I feel like in 2017, 2018, 2019, we were in a really fertile time for running. It was a potential for a big running boom. And in 2019, I saw running become mainstream when Kipchoge went 159. Like I was in school at the time, my classmates were talking about it, my parents were talking about it. People who didn't seem to have any interest in distance running knew about this, and that was in the nascent phase of this new shoe technology that was happening now. And sure, maybe we would have gotten there eventually, but at that time, I think we needed someone to usher this. And it's cool that it was Kipchoge because in his shoes, okay, no pun intended, in his shoes, I don't know if I would have gone for these like things that were essentially gimmicks at first. We look back at Breaking Two and the Ineos Challenge and with great reverie now because we know how they panned out and how they went so well and how it kind of made Kipchoge partly into what he is. But back then, there was no promise around these things other than probably a paycheck, fair enough, for Kipchoge. But this required him to focus on things other than the majors, other than the Olympics, other than an immediate legacy. And I just thought it was so cool. He was like perhaps the best distance runner in the world. And he decided to capture that moment and be the man in the middle.
Yeah. And so in 2017, excuse me, in 2017, I went to Breaking Two. I covered it in Monza, Italy.
Wow.
Yep. It was truly
Sorry. Just a side note here, Michael. For those who are watching the podcast on YouTube, behind me is a poster of Kipchoge finishing Breaking Two. And I can't really zoom in here, but Michael is in the poster. So little tidbit for you, for you all visually watching.
I'm like the dude hanging over the edge of the railing trying to take a photo of him as he's crossing the finish line. Yeah, one of many. But it was a truly a watershed moment, needless to say, in endurance sports for sure. And I will say, hanging out with the Nike people for the few days leading up to that, and in close proximity with them because we're all in the same hotel room, getting dinners with them, talking about this project. They're not sharing a whole lot of details, dribs and drabs coming out. There's like kind of a big surprise. I literally got a call from somebody and was like, would you like to come to Italy and watch this very unusual, very special marathon? I don't even know if they told me it was a marathon. They're like, there's an event that you'll want to come to. And I was like, okay. And like, I didn't know anything about it. I just had to agree to come to it. It's like, all right. And I knew Nike was putting it on, and that's it. And then I show up and you start to get some information about it. And they were nervous. The Nike people who are supremely confident and know what they're doing and are, best in the business at this stuff were nervous because they did not know the outcome. It's not like in secret in Oregon or the Rift Valley in Kenya or whatever. They were like sending the Kipper and the other guys out for like some test marathons to see how they did. And, it's a one-shot deal, it is, again, the comp of like, going to the moon, it's an all or nothing gambit, right? So they were very nervous about it. I think they had a lot of confidence in the shoe technology, and they'd obviously been testing it and wear testing it mercilessly for months with these guys, and all the data was pointing in a really positive direction. And then obviously they had tested them in the wild with some of their athletes in the Olympics and saw really good results, but they didn't know how this was going to go. And that was a big moment. I think I think Breaking Two is the single biggest moment in marathon history, at least in modern marathon history. I mean, we can go back, Pheidippides and, as an exception, but yeah. So from there, the takeaway for us common folk, I think the takeaway is like, you need a pair of these shoes. Mm-hmm. If you're trying to run a fast time, or even you're just trying to run a time for yourself that's a fast time, you're trying to PB, PR, or whatever you want to call it, you got to have a pair of the shoes. And if you don't have a pair of the shoes, you're leaving time on the table, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's the
Yeah.
big takeaway.
Yeah. I mean, even the years afterwards, when Nike had figured out the carbon plate plus Piba foam combination and other companies weren't quite there yet, you would look at any start line and everyone was wearing Nike. There were even
that was
athletes who were sponsored by other brands who dropped their sponsorship to wear Nike because they felt like they didn't have a chance if they didn't.
We saw that with Canadian athletes. We saw Canadian Olympic athletes dropping their longtime sponsor because they were like, you're paying me less money than you used to. It's not really making sense financially for me anymore. So I'd rather just say no to your sort of lesser salary and instead go with the shoes that I know might get me into the Olympics, for example.
And that was made clear. Again, that was made clear because of Kipchoge, though, because if you remember, the other two, Lisa DeCisa, I think ran a 2:06. This is from memory. And Zersine Tedeschi was somewhere in the 2:10s.
Yeah.
Had Kipchoge not delivered, that would have been a total bust of an event. And maybe there wouldn't have been a 1:59 challenge either.
Would have been really awkward because they were like live streaming it and they hyped the hell out of it. Yeah. Yeah. It was all or nothing. I mean, credit to them. What a ballsy move. Perfect segue. Not in reference to ballsiness, but in reference to the other two guys, because I remember the sports science team that had been assembled to study these guys for months were saying Zersine Tedeschi was by far physiologically the most talented runner of the group, but Kipchoge had this extraordinary running economy. And so that kind of unlocked an aspect of the sports science of endurance sports and of running in particular, this thing called running economy that we all kind of got obsessed with, right? And I think that thinking about running economy became something that, as a sort of tangent of the Kipchoge breaking two phenomenon, it kind of unlocked a lot of thinking or new thinking about the marathon and distance running. And I would say that it's created a lot of research about endurance sports in the last 7 years that just previously was kind of coming in dribs and drabs, but then now it's like a flood of research. And I think one of the really big key things as well was this little brand from, was it were they Sweden? Maurten.
They're Scandinavian.
Yeah.
I can't remember which country.
Denmark or Sweden, one of the furniture making countries. They are a huge benefactor of the Breaking Two and Kipchoge experience, because I don't know if you guys know this, but Kipchoge was actually signed to a different sports nutrition company going into Breaking Two, and then I guess somebody slid him some Maurten, which at the time was an experimental product, and was like, you should try this. And he started using it and he was like, what is this? And he dumped his other brand on like the eve of Breaking Two to use Maurten in the event. And they had this very sophisticated strategy where they're like, I think we're doing fueling wrong in the marathon. I think you need to get more in, and you need to get more in sooner. And the big hack of Maurten is they use like a hydrogel, which basically is this patented approach to creating a carbohydrate that the hydrogel envelops the carbohydrate, goes into your body, passes through your stomach into your small intestine without causing GI issues. You can jam in like a ton of carbohydrates, which I think the breaking point before was like if you had like 30 or 40 grams of carbohydrate in your system at any given time, your body just started to kind of reject it and used to give people real GI issues. And this was like this biohack to start getting more and more and more carbohydrates into your system.
I think
quickly.
Reaching like 80 grams or something like that an hour instead. You know, obviously it takes a lot of practice as well, but the product has to also work for it. You know, practicing that kind of stuff is super important. But I think it was about 80 or 90 grams an hour trying to cram that in while running. I mean, hey, the more you can take in, the more you can use. Of all the sports nutritionists I've listened to, if you can handle it, obviously you want more, more in as you can take.
Yeah, the strategy at Breaking Two, and then obviously at the 159 challenge after that, and has become kind of like more of a very common strategy for everyone across the board, all the way down to recreational runners, is just like taking in fuel earlier in the race and more consistently in the race. And I think that's been the big takeaway from that experience, is that I think everyone's doing this now. Everyone's taking gels in, like 8 gels a race, hitting gels every few K. I mean, I know Kipchoge at Breaking Two and at the 159 challenge was taking gels he was doing liquid. He was doing the drink mix.
He does the drink mix. Yeah.
Yeah. He's got the luxury of having, in those cases, in the closed events, just like having someone cycling next to him, handing him a bottle.
Right.
And then obviously in sanctioned races, the tables, right? So, but he's taken in a lot of fuel, and previous to 2017, people were not doing that. So big jump, and turned Maurten into a gigantic company. They most recently, I mean, they're the official gel of the Chicago Marathon. So that's not a cheap buy-in.
No.
So the next item that I think we can all take away from here is drafting. Drafting is a thing in running. Previous to Kipchoge, we knew about it, but I think people sort of dismissed it as like something that was more for cyclists or for objects that were moving faster through time and space than runners. But they kind of, Kipchoge and the sort of the Breaking Two team figured that like they're just going for every marginal gain, right? So they created that kind of flying V chevron around him of athletes subbing in and out to pace him. And there's been some research that's been done since then. And that research indicates, I got the number here, guys, that drag accounts for a total loss of 7.8% of an athlete's total gross metabolic power when running a 2-hour marathon. This was research that was done around Kipchoge. Which means that basically for someone at his level, he was losing between 3 minutes and 42 seconds and 5 minutes and 29 seconds over the course of a marathon by not effectively and efficiently using pacers and drafting.
Wow.
Which at that level is tremendous. It's
crazy.
The difference between a generation defining performance and a forgettable 10th place finish.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think the takeaway, even for us average runners, is get behind somebody.
I was going to mention, Michael, I know that it's not exactly the same, but, there are a bunch of months here in Costa Rica where it's awful windy. So not even talking about drag without wind, but I hide behind some of my taller running partners. And I'm going to tell you the difference in effort that I feel from running out on my own next to them and running right behind someone, just as if I were drafting when I used to cycle. Like I feel an incredible difference. And that also has to do with if there's wind coming at me instead of wind helping, but I feel much less effort. And so think about it just on such a recreational level. And just, running around the neighborhood, can you imagine the difference for the elites? Well, you just gave us the time. I mean, that's an incredible, you're talking about 5 minutes. That's an incredible amount of time to take off a marathon time.
I take that as a runner at my level. Give me 5 minutes all day long, please.
Exactly.
Yeah. And also it's a percentage. So for you, Michael, it'd be even more. Like it'd be like 5 to 7 minutes or something.
Yeah.
Wow. I'll take it.
Amazing. Yeah.
Which puts you in a whole different corral. Like that's
right. Exactly.
It's wild. So just like a quick mid-pod recap here. We talked about drag, we talked about fueling, and we talked about shoes. All of this tech, the advances you can link to Kipchoge. You need an athlete on the edge of performance, I think, to motivate this type of science. Here's a current day example. has anyone not heard the term double threshold at this point?
Right.
It's
Yeah.
it's the buzziest term in running, and basically it's doing 2 workouts in a day to get more distance completed or distance covered at threshold pace, which is roughly the pace you can hold for an hour. And the reason everybody's talking about that is because of the Norwegian athletes, the Ingebrigtsen family, who's been experimenting with that, especially Jakob Ingebrigtsen, who is knocking at the door of the 1500 meter world record. And if it wasn't for him, we probably wouldn't be talking about double threshold. And I'm sure, and I don't know this, but I'm sure that in exercise physiology labs across the world, they're testing for this right now. And we're going to learn a whole lot more in the next couple of years because we're fixated with Ingebrigtsen's training. With Kipchoge, we had like 10 years of this.
Yeah, and a lot of these studies that I'm referencing are either studies that were done contemporaneously when Kipchoge was doing this stuff, or studies that have come as part of the sort of the afterglow of the Kipchoge experience, where it's like, well, how did this happen? How did this work? Like even like so there was some research done in the last couple of years. There was a little scare with Maurten where, like, I think in 2019 their formula had not yet been patented. They were sort of going through the legal process, so they would not actually provide the recipe to researchers so that they could study just exactly how it worked and basically independently prove that their claims were accurate. And so one researcher who's done a lot of work in this realm, a UK researcher named Joshua Rowe, he initially tried to reproduce the gel, and he found that it had negligible to no effect. So there was like a real scare that like Maurten was sort of fool's gold, and then there's been subsequent research since the patents went through that, in fact, independently does verify that their claims were accurate, and there is a huge benefit to this stuff. So all that stuff is coming on the heels of Kipchoge's greatness, right? So I'd say another, like, just as a point of reference here, you think about the women's world record that just got broken in Chicago in the last month. Take what you will from it, of the controversies aside, one thing that was notable is that she used pacing really efficiently all the way to like 42.0, like her pacers just peeled off at the very, very end to allow her to get the photo op, and that was it. So, and that's a Kipchoge move, right? That's something that we've learned from Kipchoge, because there's been pacers for years. There's been pacers at major marathons. London and Chicago have had pacers for many, many, many years to get fast times. But the pacers would always drop off at like 25, 30.
Too early.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That last 10 kilometers, you got to have a pacer all the way through if you're going to really benefit from it, right? So that's something that Kipchoge sort of figured out, or Kipchoge's team figured out. And that subsequently we can take advantage of that as well. Like, think about drafting, pacing, staying behind someone, staying relaxed, staying in a group, working together all the way to the end of your marathon, and you're going to be better for it.
And I think that we're going to see, I think we're going to see a lot more of that, especially after Ruth's success in breaking the world record. I think in these future marathons, perhaps not in New York as much as because it just happened, I think we're going to see a lot of people practicing with a pacing team like that if they want to break some more records, or if they want to, get into those first positions. I think that, Kipchoge started with that project. We just saw Ruth do exactly the same thing, and we'll be seeing it. We'll be seeing it in these races.
Yeah. And so the final component to all of this, and what Kipchoge is most famous for, is the mental game. He is the great stoic of distance running. And I got something special for you guys.
Oh.
Let's hear it.
The rule
game?
number 1, you get vitamin N. You need to inject yourself with vitamin N.
N is for?
N is to learn to say no. That's a vitamin. Yeah. Secondly is setting your priorities right. Thirdly is avoid complaining. Those are the 3 factors which can lead you to self-discipline. I always say the disciplined ones are free in life. The indisciplined ones are not free. They're in prison.
There you go. Vitamin N. saying no. I'm not entirely sure what he's saying, but anyway, Kipchoge is sort of filled with these aphorisms, right? Like, you can Google like best Kipchoge motivational quotes, and there's like
I love them
many,
all.
many pages. Caitlin's
Of course
all
I
in.
do.
She's all in on the Kipchoge quotes.
The running world is a happy world. The running world is a healthy world. The running world is a peace. I love them all. I love everything that he says. It's so inspiring.
Do you want to know my favorite Kipchoge quip of all time?
Yes.
Is when he's interviewed by GQ, one of these YouTube videos, and at some point I think the interview asks him like, what's a mantra for you? And then he goes, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I think the interviewer thinks, okay, Friedrich Nietzsche. And he goes, Kelly Clarkson.
Oh! That's amazing. That's amazing.
The dude loves his Kelly Clarkson.
I mean, who would blame him?
Since you've been gone. I mean, that's just, it's a classic. Yeah. So, he famously in Breaking Two, like cracked a huge smile, and that got a lot of attention.
Yep.
And then there's like been research done. Like there was a 2019 study and a 2020 study, like pretty serious journals that did some research on like confidence, like the mental approach to long distance running, like all the stuff around Kipchoge. And it found that, yeah, there's like reduced levels of stress, improve emotional regulation through using these simple tricks like cracking a smile in a race, right? So
it helps. It helps. It makes you feel so much better. I do it all the time. If I'm feeling down, I truly just start to smile and it makes me feel better. So whether it's, the placebo effect or whether this research is really hitting the nail on the head, it really works for me. So I suggest anyone tries to do it when they're having a down moment in the race.
And also it makes for a much better race photo.
If I see I tell all my athletes, rule number 1, you see a photographer on the course, you smile and you start running. Because, we're trail runners. So if it's a hill, I don't care what the inclination is. You run for that photo.
Oh, boy. Always so positive, Katelyn. So, yeah, I think the big takeaway, and to your point, like the big takeaway with this is like, I think people think a lot more about their mental, emotional approach to running a distance event, especially the marathon, than they did before Kipchoge. Whether or not you think his quotes are like inspirational or corny or a mix of both, I think that we have all started to kind of adopt this very kind of like conscious effort to plan emotionally and psychologically for doing something really hard, which I don't know if people really talked about it as much before him. So,
yeah, I think it kind of tied to that. He provided distance runners who have that disposition, which, like, let's be honest, is most of us, right? Not just elite runners, but many marathoners, 10K runners, with a role model and a way to represent ourselves to people who are kind of curious about the sport. Before him, if I would tell someone that I'm a distance runner, they would think, oh, like Usain Bolt. And so they would have an image of running being maybe a bit more boisterous and a bit more bombastic and on the spot, like on stage. Whereas that's really not the disposition of most runners, right? It's more of a quiet, calculated, patient type of person who chases running quite seriously. And Kipchoge embodied that. Like, I can't think of a marathoner before him who became that well known and who embodied that and was able to show people what being a marathoner in most cases really is like.
And I would say, in addition to that, in terms of like dispelling or like altering the sort of cliche about the loneliness of the long distance runner. Another thing that maybe we can't give Kipchoge full credit for, but he talked about quite a bit, and in quite a bit of his the marketing around him is like, he's not a solo act. He's a guy who trains in a group. And also, there's kind of famously, if you go on YouTube, you can watch any number of these videos of like various documentary type shorts about him in his global sports camp group in Kenya, training with like 30, 40 guys, living this very Spartan existence. You know, he's sleeping on a little cot or a bed. He's sharing a room with a roommate. You know, this is not a wealthy, powerful, elite athlete who's getting the star treatment and is, you know, excluded or separated himself from the up and comers. This is a guy who like lives and trains with his group. And I think in a way we can take away from that like, while running is an individual sport and something that is actually quite enjoyable to do by yourself, it is definitely something where if you want to improve, like join a group, get in with the group, you know, work with other people, be challenged by them, learn from them. And you're going to get better that way. So
I think I actually reposted one of his posts once or way back when, where he actually wrote in the text that running is a team sport. And I loved it when he said that, because of course he has, you know, he goes out with his pacemakers, with his teammates, people probably not all at his level, obviously. And I love that he said that, because I do feel like you're right, Michael. Going out and taking that run on your own is really nice time. And, you know, you have your solitary moments. But at the end of the day, what he was doing, especially with all of the big projects, really did feel like a team sport. And I love it that he, you know, there's just one thing that I want to pull out about Kipchoge. Like he talks about being self-confident and that you need to believe in yourself and you need to believe that you're the best. And he said that his coach had told him, you need to believe that you're the best. And I don't understand how he gives us this advice, yet still comes off as is so incredibly humble as he is. I don't know how he has this magic of saying like, no, I believed I was the best. I believed that I was the winner. I believed that I would win. But he just says it with this humility that you say, wow, like what I don't know. It was just really good advice, all part of the mental game, trying to feel super confident, but also being grounded and down to earth and showing the humility that he has. And I think that's something else. I just wanted to kind of highlight that because that's something super special about him.
Well, it's a funny paradox because when you look at other absolutely dominating figures in their own respective sports, they aren't necessarily like that.
Right.
You know, Mike Tyson, Tiger Woods, Michael Jordan are probably the equivalents on the male side to Kipchoge.
Yep.
None of these gentlemen, as dominant and as tremendous athletes as they were, I think will go down in history for being humble.
Right.
No. Well, yeah, or being a good hang. Yeah, Michael Jordan. I mean, just like making up enemies left and right.
Who would you choose to hang out with for a day? Tiger, Michael Jordan, or Mike Tyson?
I mean, I want to stay married, so not Tiger Woods.
What?
I'm going with Jordan.
You're gonna go with Jordan because he tried to get you to like bet on a like a round of golf or something like that. I don't know.
I don't know about Mike Tyson. I don't know those three. That's a tough decision.
I feel like at the end of The Last Dance, the Jordan documentary series, when he like won the second three-peat.
Yep.
He's like alone in a hotel suite with like all the yes men, like all the money people and the ownership people and the Nike people. And none of his teammates are there hanging out with him because no one liked him because he was not a nice person to be around. Right. He's an alienating force. I suppose you could argue he like drove people to greatness by driving them crazy and harassing them left and right.
That's what I see.
I think, yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, I think Kipchoge is probably the nicest of the group by far to hang out with. Like,
no, is he in the? If he was one of the choices, obviously
no,
Kipchoge.
No, he's not.
Oh,
so that means I'm going with Mike Tyson. Oh boy, that's complicated.
Let's all choose Kipchoge. Kipchoge, come speak to us. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Yeah, I go for Tiger for the record.
You go for okay.
I have this theory that Mike Tyson was not acting at all in either of those hangover movies that he was in. That was just like him.
You just end up with like a tiger in your bathroom. Okay. Yeah. I don't think you're ending up with a tiger and not knowing what happened to you the night before in Las Vegas if you're hanging out with Eliud Kipchoge. You're probably going to bed at like sunset. Yeah. You're eating a nice healthy meal at 4:30. You're getting up before dawn, you're doing some yoga, you're doing a little mindfulness routine on your phone or whatever. Like he's an apps guy for sure. He just got like, he's yeah. I think he's nice to a fault, Eliud Kipchoge, no doubt.
Yep.
All right. So we said at the top, Eliud Kipchoge is 40 ? The reason why we say that is if you're not like a total running nerd, is that like it's a long and widely held belief that he's at least 5 years older than what's on his birth certificate. And this goes back to like in Kenya, particularly in this period, in the period when he was born in the mid 80s to late 70s, whenever he was actually born, records weren't kept. And when young athletes were going to be sent out of the country for the first time to compete, often they would create a document, create a passport, and it would be kind of like, all right, we want this guy to go compete at World Juniors, but you got to be under like, 20 or whatever to compete. So you're going to be under 20 today, Eliud, even though you're 23 or 25. So the joke is that he's been 40 for 5 years, but how old he really is, I don't know. I wonder if he actually knows. I wonder if he knows, but he's just kind of like, it's been like 25 years of me being this other age. I can't change it now. It's an awkward position to find yourself.
It is. I mean, I think back like maybe 5-10 years ago, it would have been disadvantageous for him to like come out and say, actually, I'm 38, 39 years old. I think now it's actually advantageous. Like if you were actually 45, he should come out and say it.
Yeah, he should.
Just like, he's like, I ran the world record for a Masters world record, and I ran the world record at the same time. So eat that, Kenenisa Bekele, with your Masters world record.
And then it'll affect his next race, right? This 10K in Thailand, and we call like, it's fair to say it's not a rumor anymore, right? Like this is happening. He's going to be racing this 10. And the goal, I think, that's the part that might still be rumors. He's probably taking aim at the Masters world record for men 40 plus, right? 40, 44, which is held by a Bernard Legat at 27:49. Now, if
wow,
that is, it's very fast.
That's
if
a quick race.
Kipchoge was 45, you wouldn't have to go nearly as quickly. But what do you guys think? Over under? If he goes and runs a 10K, can he drop under 27:49 in Thailand?
He's got to pull those track routes. He's got to pull back up those track routes. But of course, he can do anything.
Maybe he'll like get his groove back. Maybe this is what he needed. He needed to go back to the origin story of him being a track runner. He needs to get on the track and do some repeats and get that speed back a little bit. Maybe he just finds new life after that. Let's close this up with the recommendations that Mr. Kipchoge is not going to heed from us. But what do you think he should do? I mean, what do you think he should do? And when he makes his announcement in January of 2025, like where does Eliud Kipchoge go with his career from here?
There is no way he is retiring. He's just too special of an athlete. So I don't think that's coming. I did, listening to a bunch of different interviews, I do know that he wants to complete all of the Avid World majors, which I think is something that should still be on his bucket list as the best marathon runner of all time. And so he's got a New York, which is, I think, the only one that he hasn't run. I know that Boston wasn't his best performance, but I know that the only one that he hasn't run is New York. So I feel like he's going to want to finish that at some point. And as Michael said, get his six medal finisher. Six-star finisher medal.
He's a
exactly.
6-star.
Exactly.
I actually think his options are, other than that, I agree with you, Katelyn. I think outside of that, his options are becoming somewhat limited because he's chosen to be this huge ambassador for, let's call it mainstream running. And by that, I mean, like, it wouldn't really make sense to see Kipchoge like hit the trails or do an ultra. It would seem that he's out of place. I'm not sure what his options are. What I hope, and you see this in all sports, is that some athletes stick around long enough to see themselves lose their dominance and struggle against people who are younger. I'm not sure if Kipchoge is going to go that route, but what I don't want to see happen is him exiting the sport in any way. He, since Usain Bolt, is the most marketable male runner of any kind, in my opinion, in the world. And I know that he needs to not only capitalize on that for himself financially, which maybe is a consideration, sure, cool, but also he's created a brand around himself, around this type of long game kind of running, this technical or technological advancement type of running. He's inspired a generation, and I think he's a big reason that we have the running boom that we have today. It would be a shame to lose him to the shadows, and because he could decide just to go back and live his own life by himself. But I would love to see him keep the brand, the Kipchoge brand, going and inspire another generation of athletes.
Oh, he'll do that, no doubt. But an ultra, Alex, you just gave me the best idea. He's got to do a 50.
I knew you were going to say, I was waiting for Katelyn to say that.
He's
I was
got
so
to do
proud of
that.
you that you just bypassed that. And you're like, no, wait a minute. Maybe he needs to start running ultras.
What if the announcement is he's entering the UTMB cycle?
Oh my God, that would be amazing.
Please no. Please no.
Oh, no. But Jim Walmsley in the group, they don't want to run against real runners. So,
oh, wow.
Wow.
Oh, that's
good thing we buried that one 49 minutes into the pod.
Thanks,
so no one
thanks for that. Thanks for that, Michael. It's a low blow.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I didn't mean that against you, Katelyn.
Low blow.
I just mean that, like, at some point in the future, when the money gets to a place where it becomes desirable to run these races, to go after the purse, and when some event like UTMB says, like, you know what, it would be really awesome if we did get the person who won the London Marathon last year to run UTMB instead of running a fall race or whatever. Like, they skip that, they bypass that, and they focus on UTMB in the middle of the year instead. It'd be really interesting to see what would happen. We've had some top flight, or not top flight, but like some like pretty good East African runners dabble in this stuff in the past with really mixed results. And I think that allows for this like weird argument where it's like, well, ultra trail runners are special. Kilian Jornet is like a different animal, you know, and or Jim Walmsley, you know, they're great runners. But there's something to be said for figuring out the ultra. It's a different thing. It's maybe even not a different sport, but it's a different thing. But I don't know, if you got like a bunch of people who can run 2:02 in the marathon and you kind of get them to focus on it and you dangle, I don't know, 150,000 or 100,000 US dollars in front of them, it might change that sport.
They might do it.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, you know, that's business, right? So
where do you think he's going, Michael? What do you think he's going to tell us?
Yeah, sorry, I just went down this like, I'm not going to edit that out, but people will be mad if they listen to that. I'm not insulting ultra. I have respect. It's just the event's evolving. I don't know what he does. I think, Alex, you make a good point. I think, Katelyn, I agree with you. It'd be cool if he did an ultra. It'd be awesome. It'd be awesome if Nike was just like, you know, we're pouring some more and more money into trails. Like, we want our guy to become an ultra guy or just a trail guy, any trail denomination. That'd be awesome. That'd be very cool. I'd love to see that. I'd love to see him open that up, but it's probably not going to happen. Yeah. Okay. So Michael Jordan, he bought an NBA franchise after he retired. Tiger Woods is doing that thing that you just described where he's still kind of plugging away and kind of just fading out in a bad way and getting beat by younger, better golfers now. Not a good look. Mike Tyson's a different story. There's some mental health issues there, right? So he's not a good comp. Tom Brady, your boy, Katelyn.
Commentating now.
He's retired to a life of being a mediocre commentator. And
hey. Don't bash my boy, okay?
And he's better at being a commentator than I would ever be. So he's also a minority owner of a franchise as well. Kipchoge has none of those options. He has none of those options, which sucks. It sucks for him, sucks for the sport, kind of shows the state of the sport, right? Is that like he doesn't have any of these options except for the Tiger Woods option, right? I don't know where he goes. I think he leans into the ambassadorship thing. I think if you were to be like a prognosticator, I'd say that like Nike's going to try to find like an emeritus role for him where he's going to these majors. He's going to Asia more where there's more like growth potential. He's sort of showing up and shaking hands and doing kind of a global version of what Meb has been doing in the US for the last few years, which is like kind of like aging out gracefully and then transitioning into being an ambassador for a brand, an ambassador for an event, that sort of thing. I could see him playing a bigger role in like Berlin and London, where he's had a lot of success. And then of course, closing out the World Marathon Majors and running New York as well.
Yep.
That'd be cool. I don't know what else. I don't know what he does. Be awesome if Nike gave him a shoe. The Alpha Fly was kind of his shoe, but they just didn't put his name on it, right? So I mean, there was a Kipchoge colorway at one point around 2019 when the shoe came out, but they didn't give him the shoe. They called it the Alpha Fly. They didn't call it the Kipchoge. It's too bad for him because it was the Air Jordan and the Jordan brand, and that's what made Jordan rich, right? So anyway, poor Kipchoge. He should own a chunk of the super shoe money.
Absolutely.
Doesn't have it. Mm-hmm. Okay, guys. So just quick recap. It's all about the shoes. We all race in super shoes, and we have since shortly after Breaking 2, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
We needed to. I just tried my first ones this year.
That's right. You were.
Yeah. I was late. Yeah. I was late to the party, but everyone should be racing.
But even trail shoes are now, there's super trail shoes. There's carbon plated, supercritical foam trail shoes. There you go.
Yep.
Running economy, we care more about that. We focus more on that. Not that we can do a whole lot about it. We can train in running economy more. Fueling. Do we, Alex, you're new to the longer stuff. Well, you're exempted, but like Katelyn, also with you ultra running, like fueling has been a focus forever, right?
Yep.
It's been a, but I imagine in the marathon, you were thinking quite a bit about gels, about fueling.
Yep. Yeah. No, absolutely. That strategy is just super important. And the Maurten is the hot topic. It's a hot item now. Yep. So it's the one to use.
Drafting and pacing. I think it's something that we can probably all of us do a little bit better in our respective running careers, our respective races. I think that's something that like I think about a lot, but it's hard when you're not an elite athlete. You can't you don't have pacers, so you got to like find someone to pace with. But that's something I think that I think we can all focus on that one a little bit better. And then obviously the mental game.
I just had a great idea. Why don't you guys let's make a V for me in Boston, and you guys can be my pacers.
Alex and I will bandit the Boston Marathon.
I've got just you.
Oh, that's good. We need to have we can do the little shape and get like an aerial drone shot, and we're just like the logo. That'd be nice.
We'll get Thomas in there. Yeah. Oh, let's
whole
give me a team. Yeah.
Bring Amby back, man.
And Amby.
Dude still runs. I mean, he did Berlin. He's still running marathons. He's still putting in the work.
Yep.
If the BAA would allow you to have pacers and allow us to go run on the course without us getting in trouble, which they won't, I would gladly pace you, Kate.
Thank you.
That'd be so much fun.
Thank you, Michael.
That'd be so much fun. And then obviously upping our mental game. I think it's something that we all think about, right? And it's something that I think is really important if you're training for a marathon. And Seer, did you smile during the half marathon, your first half marathon?
Yes, good. I did.
Did you think about it?
I thought about it. Yeah, a couple times. A couple times, because it was the least intense race I had done in a while, meaning going from a 5K, 10K to a half marathon. I tried to chill out as much as I could for the time that I had. So a couple times, just tried to let the face go lax, look at the posters. Yep, I had Kipchoge on my mind.
Nice. I love that.
All right, guys. On that note, let's leave this with a big grin on our faces.
Happy birthday, Kipchoge.
Happy birthday, Eliud Kipchoge. We'll leave with a final Kipchoge thought.
Only the disciplined ones are free in life. If you are in discipline, you are a slave to your moods. You are a slave to your passions.
There we go. All right. Thanks very much, guys. Talk to you next week.
Till next time.